guys, thanks for watching. This is an alla prima sky study that I did in about an hour and 30 or 45 minutes. I cut out a few pauses where I was just looking at the canvas to decide what to do next. I definitely had in mind to complete this in one quick painting session. I'm using Rembrandt oil colors and silver brushes on a canvas over panel that has been slightly stained with burnt umber, thinned with odorless mineral spirits, and left to dry. I had a pre-mixed palette from another painting where I did a big sky, so I thought it would be fun to paint a couple of small sky paintings to use up my color strings. Here is my palette when I first started the painting Spring Isolation. I have all of my colors straight out of the tube on the right-hand side of the palette. They are laid out in warm and cool color strings and arranged with the more transparent dark colors at the top of the palette and more opaque lighter colors toward the bottom. Then I mix up color strings that I think I'm going to use in the painting in the middle and on the left-hand side of the palette. I use a Masterson resealable palette that I store in the freezer between painting sessions, so the paint on my palette will last for weeks. The freezer doesn't freeze the paint, it just slows down the oxidation, which is how oil paint dries. My palette is looking pretty messy at this point, but there's a method to the madness. You can see that I have the browns kind of all together. There's a little swath of greens. The blues are mostly at the top. There's a little puddle of a darker purple blue down on the right, and then I have all of my warm colors. The oranges, pinks, and corals are all together. Whenever I'm going to mix a new color or adjust one of those colors, I'll go back to that same area of the palette to mix, rather than mixing in random areas of the palette. That keeps the colors on your palette clean and not too muddy. I'm starting off with a medium brown color using a small Bristlon filbert. I'm looking for shapes, mostly working in straight lines, matching angles I see in the clouds. After I get the basic lines down and have a feel for the layout of the clouds, I start painting the sky. I'm mostly looking at values. I want to paint the sky first and then the clouds on top of it. That way I'll have nice, soft, wet edges so that I can have buttery, lost and found edges of the clouds. My colors are not the exact colors I see in the photograph. I have a tendency when I'm painting from photographs to try to look for a little bit more color, because I know that in reality I would probably see more color. Photographs have a tendency to flatten it. You'll see that I'm doing some mixing on the canvas. For example, I'll paint a lighter area into a midtone and then mix in some midtones into darker areas. For clouds, it's nice to have plenty of paint on the canvas so that you can have paint on the surface to mix into and for really soft edges. Whenever I'm doing a painting from a photo like this, where it's mostly monochromatic, just lighter and darker shades of one color, I think about the temperature of the light and try to establish that as a concept for the painting. I decide if the light is warm or cool, and that gives me the answer to whether or not the shadows are warm or cool. So in this situation, I decided that the sun behind the clouds would be warm, and that dictated that the shadow side of the clouds would be cooler. That doesn't mean that I'll paint orange and blue clouds. It just means that the blues I'm using will be warmer and cooler in relationship to each other. That concept is one that will inform my color choices throughout the painting. It's a great way to make the painting more lively and interesting. I'm using an extra long Grand Prix filbert. It's a natural bristle and it holds a lot of paint. I want to get one pass over the whole canvas before I start adding anything I might think of as details. I'm drawing with paint, putting lights where they go and darks where they go in very specific shapes. I don't think of it as simply laying down color. I am drawing with the paint, always. Sometimes it feels really great to focus on a quick sketch. I recommend alla prima paintings as a regular part of your practice. It's very helpful for teaching quick decision making, identifying values and color quickly. Plus, everything is wet, so you're able to have lots of soft edges. And besides, it's fun. The things you learn doing these small sketches will improve all your painting skills. I've started adding in some of the light areas of the clouds where the sky is mostly painted behind them. I'm doing this so that the clouds will physically sit on top of the sky, helping to create the illusion of depth and make it appear as if the clouds are nearer to us. Notice that I changed my grip on the brush to an overhand one. It's important when you're watching someone paint to not only pay attention to the color that they're using, but how they hold the brush. For example, how far back on the handle do they hold it, and when do they choke up on it? At what angle does the brush meet the canvas? Sometimes you'll notice the brush is pointed at the canvas, but sometimes I kind of drag it along the surface parallel to the canvas. What about the speed of the mark? Sometimes it's a quick mark, sometimes it's a scrubbing mark, sometimes it's a slow, deliberate mark. Also, pay attention to how forcefully the brush is pushed into the canvas. Sometimes I'm pushing hard because I want the paint to fill in all the canvas texture, or I'm working in a shadow area where I want to have less visible brushwork. Save your expressive brush marks for the light areas of the painting, because a smooth surface will recede into the shadows, and heavier paint with visible brushwork will pop forward. That's another tool we use to create the illusion of depth. Sometimes I'm delicately using a soft touch. I barely touch the surface of the painting, dragging the paint around on the surface, not disturbing the paint layers that are between the surface and the canvas. You'll also notice that I angle my brush different ways when approaching the canvas, coming at it from all sides depending on what allows the proper mark. I have most of the light areas of the clouds laid in at this point. All the edges are too hard, so I'll work for a while to soften them. I want them to disappear and blend in with the sky to have that wispy, soft, buttery edge look. Next, I will need to finish the first full color pass on the entire painting. At this point, I decided to push the concept that the light is warm and began introducing some coral and pink shades into the light areas. The white I'd used seemed too cool, so to fix that, I introduced these warm shades. I switched to a fan brush because of the messy mark that it makes. I thought that would describe the clouds better than if I used a brush that made a smooth mark. At some point in many paintings, the photo reference is abandoned, and I'm just trying to make a great painting. I haven't completely abandoned the photo reference because I still want it to look like those exact clouds, but I'm doing some imaginative colors based on my concept of a warm light and cool shadows. to me that the painting needed a little more movement. It looked as if the clouds were moving off to the right-hand side of the canvas, so I started making directional brush strokes from my right-hand side down to the left-hand side of the canvas. The angled brush strokes would help describe the feeling that was in the photo. More importantly, it would describe the direction of the clouds being blown by the wind.